Well, hello everybody. My name is Brian Izard. I'm the General Manager of the Canadian Wood Pallet and Container Association. And today we'll be delivering the third in a series of 5 webinars from our virtual safety group. And the webinar's title is Ergonomics Safety. So I apologize right from the start. I'm getting over a cold, so if I sound a little hoarse or I cough, that's why. So the next slide deals with the agenda, and just a quick run through. We'll talk a little bit about the virtual safety group, a legal reminder for responsibilities of employers, talk a little bit about general workplace specific training, what a procedure is, try and orient ourselves to what some of the terminology is that we'll be referring to, and explain the difference between ergonomics and musculoskeletal disorders, which is the terminology used both by the regulatory agencies in Canada and the physicians. And then we'll finish up with a reminder of where you can find this information on the CWPCA website. So the slide that I like to introduce at this point in time is to talk about who actually delivers this type of training inside the workplace. So first of all, it's a reminder is that the person that is doing the training must be competent. So if I'm training, for example, individuals attending this webinar, what defines my competency? So I'll give you a couple of illustrations. So number one, I have a degree in occupational health and safety from McMaster University. I've got 30 years of experience in dealing with these exact issues around ergonomics, training people on how to prevent injuries, working with joint health and safety committees to identify ergonomic hazards, managing disability after injuries. These are all areas that add to my expertise on the issue. When you're doing training inside your own facilities, you must remember that the person delivering training must have some exposure or competency with the subject matter. And they acquire that either through professional knowledge or training or experience with the topic at hand. Many people ask me, where do I find specific legislation pertaining to ergonomics? And in actual fact, not all of that information is labeled accordingly. But where the regulatory agencies fall to in terms of finding legislation that deals with ergonomic issues is around the general duty clause, which talks about all unregulated hazards in the workplace, the requirement of employers to keep the workplace hazard-free, the requirement that if you recognize a hazard within your workplace, you have to do something about it. Those are all found in the general duty clause. Now, there's additional sections that a regulatory agency may be looking at, but what we should all be aware of is that currently about 40% of all the injuries that are occurring in our industry are ergonomic related. And that's a big number. So those are lifting, repetitive strain type of injuries that are causing, in some cases, very lengthy ailments. So it's a serious problem within our industry, and it's one that is drawing the attention of the regulatory agencies, meaning that they're visiting sites, they're issuing orders where employers are required to put in stackers or destackers, or they are being restricted in terms of the type of work that employees can or cannot do. this is the area where our industry is going, and it's going to be more of a challenge in the months to come, I suspect. So once again, it's a reminder that the person that's doing the training should be knowledgeable, and he has to be competent. The training tools that we're providing you through the association are basically threefold, and they're designed specifically for our industry and to protect both employees and employers in the event that there's involvement from a regulatory agency. The key thing we're trying to accomplish is to be able to demonstrate that we have delivered good quality workplace-specific training for employees in order to prevent injuries. And that consists of basically three facets of training. One is a safety standard or a safe work practice, which is a written method of how you do the work. Number two, it's a training presentation. So that's in a PowerPoint presentation which you can download from the website and customize to your particular workplace using photographs of the type of equipment you have in your plant. And the third is a record of training. I can't emphasize how important it is that once you do the training, you record the training and you attach a copy of the standard and the PowerPoint behind it in order to demonstrate to any regulatory agency visiting your site the dates, the people involved, and the quality of the training that's been delivered. So first of all, what is ergonomic safety and what's the intent of this training program? Basically, we're trying to provide a study or an evaluation of what the principles of ergonomics, what they represent, to help you recognize risk factors, signs, and symptoms of musculoskeletal disorders. And I know that's a big term, but that's the term that regulatory agencies will be using and what doctors are typically using in terms of communicating with the employer when somebody's injured. So we need to understand what does that mean and get familiar with that term. The third point there is that we want to understand our program for identifying, reporting, and controlling these types of injuries. So once we see there's a problem in the workplace, what do we do about it? How do we fix it? And we want to talk a little bit about how you protect yourself from an injury and reduce your own personal risk. So ergonomics is a big topic, but if you had to break it down to a couple of key points, this is what it would mean. It would mean that instead of fitting people into a job, ergonomics is about modifying the job to fit the capabilities of people. Now I know that that's a big topic, but basically it's the science or the study of how to prevent injuries to the body, which are referred to as musculoskeletal disorders. And those type of injuries are typically derived from repetitive reaching, forceful exertions, bending, lifting, or working with vibrating equipment. And an example of vibrating equipment would be a sawzall used to cut through a board and separate the board from the stringer and cut the nails. It's that vibration that's transferred up through the hand, through the elbow, into the shoulder, and the lower neck that causes a musculoskeletal disorder. So we'll talk a little more about that as we continue. It talks about engineering controls, which is the development of machinery to reduce the potential incidence of these types of injuries. And in the lower right-hand corner, you see an example of an engineering control used to eliminate lifting in a pallet sortation operation. Okay, and this particular device is a I believe it's VacuLift. Okay, it's quite common. I've installed them and used them in my past career, and that's what an engineering control is. So it's installing machinery to take out some of the heavy lifting that's potentially injuring your workers. Another example would be conveyor belts, roller conveyors, stackers, destackers. These are all examples of controls that you can implement in a workplace to reduce the potential for ergonomic injuries. Next is safe work practices. So that's written procedures to workers on how to properly do the work. And the last example is use of personal protective equipment. So next slide deals with a definition. What are musculoskeletal disorders? So if you're in a position where you're reviewing doctor's notes currently, these are very typical types of responses from physicians on standard types of injuries that have occurred to you employees in the workplace. And one is that there's soft tissue issues in the form of back pain, muscle strain, tendinitis, which is irritation of the tendons that join the muscle to the bone, carpal tunnel syndrome, which is quite common for people using the devices in a desk where they overuse use their hands, rotator cuff syndrome, which is injury to the muscle and tendons around the shoulder joint, tennis elbow, tenosynovitis, which is the trigger finger, or what we refer to in industry as white finger, and shoulder pain. So these are the standard disorders that you would see coming back from a doctor if somebody was injured in the workplace due to this type of work. The symptoms, so this is important in training because many of our workers, many of our employees don't really understand and have never been taught properly to recognize what MSD looks like. And if they are not taught properly, what happens is when they start to develop the pain, they maybe fall back onto something their sports coach told them, which is work through it. That's an incorrect assumption. When you start feeling these types of pains, you want to deal with them in a proper manner before you severely irritate the muscle or the tendon. And that's a key part of your training program, is to explain to your employees, this is what an MSD symptom looks like, and if you don't deal with it properly, it will become more severe, and the recovery time lengthens. So in the training that I've done to people, and I've probably trained a couple hundred people on this particular issue, is I said, look, if you're starting to feel these type of symptoms, you know, bring them forward and let us deal with them, and don't work through them, because once again you can really injure your joint here. So this is a severe pain in the back, shoulder, or neck, and pain level meaning something you probably need 2 Tylenol to deal with. It's tightness or discomfort or stiffness or soreness or burning in the hands, the wrists, the fingers, tingling or coldness or numbness in the hands, clumsiness, loss of strength or coordination of the hands, a level of pain that wakes you up at night, feeling that you need to massage your hands or wrists. So there's no mistaking that the pallet industry is a difficult industry, or pallet container industry is a difficult industry to work in. There's a lot of very physical labor. We tend to hire people with that have to be in good physical condition. While it's not mentioned here, I always made a practice of putting all of my staff through what we call pre-employment medical. I did that for 2 reasons. Number one, I didn't want to hire somebody else's problem. because obviously that is not where I want to go. I want to hire healthy people, but also pre-employment medicals can be set up in a way that identify the type of work, the amount of lifting, the range of motion required to do the job properly. And I always thought that for $200 it was a good investment, and that's roughly what it would cost for pre-employment medical. But these are some of the things that you might want to think about on the prevention side. So the common ergonomic risk factors, what causes people to get injured in the workplace are basically broken down to 3 or 4 key issues. Number one, excessive force. What does that mean typically? Excessive force means, for example, you've loaded a stack of pallets onto a conveyor. Some of the roller conveyors are broken or missing. It jams, so your worker puts significantly more force to push it over the jam and feels a sharp searing pain up his back. That's an example of excessive force. Awkward or strained posture. So an example of that is somebody's using a square table, okay, and it's flat, and in order to nail a board on the far side of the pallet or remove it and repair it, he's got to reach across well over onto the other side of the pallet in order to reach it. That's an example of a strained posture where he's using the nail gun and his back isn't upright, it's severely extended. That's what we're talking about around awkward and sustained posture. Repetition or lack of rest. So what we're talking about there is where the type of behavior consistently moves the same joint day in and day out over an 8-hour period, and that it causes problems as a result of that. Now it's quite clear that some workers can do that without any problem, others can't. Today we're going to talk about some of the strategies to make sure that people who are doing that kind of work can do it day in, day out. The type of risk factors that combine in the workplace to increase the chance of an injury occurring are where you're using very, very heavy pallets and the back is bent and you're twisting your back while you're lifting the pallets. It's the use of repetitive power tools over long periods of time. It's working at improper heights. It's extreme reaching forward of the workers. So the point that I want to make is the sample photo that you see here. This is an example of somebody that's designed the workplace properly, and it's an example of a best practice that eliminates many of the risk factors. And if you look at that table design, while it doesn't look sophisticated, in actual fact, a lot of work and thought has gone into making sure that that table eliminates the major risk factors around this workstation. Number one, it's round instead of square, okay? And round meaning he can easily get to any corner or side of it that he wants to without going around a sharp edge. Number two, the table is beveled to the top. So it doesn't have a significant bevel, but it's a concave, sort of like an example would be sort of like a pod or a walk, which allows him to spin the pallet and nail the opposite side. So this is not a substantial cost, but eliminates many of the risk factors associated with pallet repair in a standard pallet recycling operation. If anybody would be interested in getting some more specifics around how that table is designed, they can contact me separately. The next thing that we want to understand about how to prevent MSDSs is around the work surfaces. So the ideal work surface for assembling pallets is just below elbow height. And this permits the worker to keep an upright arm vertical with his elbow flexed at about 90 degrees. So the key thing then is to remember that obviously your workers are at different heights, and you want to be able to vary the height according to the height of the table according to the worker's height if you want to avoid these type of problems. And once again, we talked about this rotating table. So generally, you want to avoid any situation where the worker is reaching any more than around 17 inches from the front of his body. The next issue is around material handling of pallets and materials. And once again, the workers need to maintain a relatively straight back when they're either loading boards into their workstation or removing boards from their workstation. So as you can see, this is not a fancy setup, but the boards are placed in roughly at waist level behind the workstation, which prevents the worker from having to lift down or lift in a bending position to pull the boards up and use them on the repair table. Another example of trying to improve on the work surface is to use, when they're doing pallet assembly, is to use a workstation where it's at a tilted level, okay, and they're nailing in a tilted position. Once again, the idea is to minimize the amount of bending over that the worker is engaged in. The last issue that we're going to talk about around preventing MSDSs at the workstation is around the work surface. So the challenge in a recycling operation or pallet manufacturing operation is that you're basically working off a concrete floor, and you're standing for long periods of time. So there's two potential opportunities to prevent injuries related to standing on concrete, which is very hard both on the feet and the back. And one is to place anti-fatigue mats, which are just basically rubber mats over the concrete. And I know you can't see it in this picture, but there is one. And the second is to make sure that your workers have proper footwear. And in my particular case, I made sure that they had proper footwear with proper inserts if they needed them. The inserts weren't expensive, but cushioning the feet is a very important strategy to preventing MSDs, especially in a recycling operation. You'll have to excuse me. This is the wrong slide. So I'm going to send the proper. I'm just going to take a minute and find the proper presentation. I'm going to send it across. Just bear with me, okay? That's the proper shot. Okay. So what we see is a risk factor: somebody lifting manually and really not doing the right things. So, individual economic risk factors. And this is where you talk to the employee about what he can do personally to prevent injuring himself. First of all, if he's not following proper work practices, he's going to injure himself. Number two, he needs to think about how he cares for himself when he either is sitting at a desk or when he's lifting in the workplace. And we have a couple of shots of some of the right ways and the wrong ways to lift. And surprisingly, these are some very innocent type of injuries, and people that we hire generally think they're physically fit, But when you, for example, if you look at that first shot where they bend over and lift with a bent back, that's just a recipe for injuring yourself. In my experience, most of the injuries that I've had to deal with in terms of a lifting nature have been around people who have a weight of somewhere around 20 to 30 pounds, which isn't uncommon in our industry, and they turn the spine without moving the feet. So the proper way is to lift, keep the weight close to your waist or your stomach, and then move your feet. If you turn without moving your feet and you turn that spine, you're just asking for trouble. So in terms of risk factors, proper lifting techniques, which would be a subset of what we're talking about here, are very important to train your employees on. Third thing is to talk about sports injuries. And you know, I've had some exposure to where people have been playing hockey or snowmobile injuries outside of the workplace. And of course, they come into the workplace and try to do that work with those injuries, and of course can hurt themselves quite badly. So I've always encouraged people to say, look, if you have had an injury outside of the workplace, we're going to have to know about it. They're not easy to deal with, but in our type of injury, our industry, you can really injure yourself badly if you come to work and try to do work on top of a sports injury that you've incurred outside of the workplace. Poor physical fitness is another individual risk factor, so that if you're not keeping yourself in reasonably good physical condition, you're liable to injure yourself in our type of work. In my experience, I've always encouraged workers to take 5-10 minutes at the start of the shift and do some warm-up stretches. The analogy is that your muscles are like an elastic band, and if it's cold and you pull on an elastic band, you know what happens. It snaps or cracks. And if you can imagine a tendon linked to a shoulder muscle, if you don't warm up properly, what happens is when you start doing that heavy lifting, it pulls away from the bone, and now you've got an injury that's going to be very hard to deal with. So some simple warm-up strategies. You know, I had the supervisor take the employees through just a short warm-up stretching exercise. I found it very beneficial to preventing workplace injuries. One plant in particular was able to go for 3 years without an injury because they implemented a nice stretching program. And also, this allows when people are starting to feel some pain, they can stretch it out and eliminate the pain during the shift. The last one is to report injuries sooner than later. Okay, so if you're feeling some discomfort, the idea is come forward with a supervisor, talk to him, and do something about it. And that can be a rotation or a period of rest. But certainly if you keep working through, if your body's telling you you're hurting and you work through it, there's a good chance that you're going to severely injure that joint or tendon. So ideal work surfaces. Okay, so we've already talked about this a little bit. Once again, it's the rounded table. You know, once again, you see this slide, it doesn't look fancy, but it's ergonomically, it's designed pretty well. Everything's at waist level. The nail gun that this guy's operating with doesn't particularly require a counterbalance unit. It's below the weight restriction. But I know for a fact that this location has been visited by the local regulatory agency on many occasions, and they found that this workplace has been properly set up, ergonomically speaking. This is the work surface I was talking about earlier. Didn't have the proper slide in it, but once again, here's an example of a work surface that's been set up properly, where you have a tilted work surface that allows the worker to remain upright most of the time and doesn't force him to lean over and put pressure on that lower spine. So once again, here's another best practice of how to design an ergonomically proper workstation. And here what it was I was talking about earlier about ways to prevent strain on the knees and lower back. And two examples is a anti-fatigue mat, which I found very beneficial at workstations, and I made sure that the shoes that the workers were using were in good shape, and if need be, it had those inner soles. Once you start talking about this with staff, you get a lot of positive feedback from them. They know that you care, and it's where prevention around MSDS should be in the workplace. The next slide deals with material handling assistive devices. Now, in workplaces, these have quite a range. They can be something simple as like a hand cart used to move nails around. So a box of nails varies in weight. One box certainly is within the realm of a worker moving, but if they're moving 2 or 3, the training that you engage in the workplace should be use a hand cart, okay? Or, you're restricted to moving 1 box at a time. When people start moving 2 and 3, they run the risk of injuring themselves. In this particular case, you see the device that the employee is working. This particular device that I've had a lot of experience with is particularly good at eliminating a lot of lower back strain, and in my experience, a significant enhancement to productivity. The other assistive devices, of course, are forklifts, and a common sense rule is to restrict your stack heights. And rather than have employees, building high stack heights, 15, 16, 18, 20, cut the stack heights down to 10, 12, and have the forklift move it. That's what the forklifts are there for. But also hand jacks, okay, providing hand jacks to move stacks around is another example of providing assistive devices in the workplace to eliminate the potential for an injury. Other examples of how to prevent MSDS in the workplace are around tool weight. So depending on the weight of your nail guns, you'll want to look at whether you need to install a counterbalance. Many of the recycling plants don't use counterbalances for a number of good reasons, but it really is a function of the weight, and typically anything over 8.5, 9 pounds on a nail gun would require the use of a counterbalance and a supporting mechanism above it. Another good strategy around preventing MSDS is job rotation. Now, in some workplaces that's very difficult, but in the workplaces I was familiar with, I use job rotation quite successfully to eliminate the potential for injuries and also to comply with regulatory orders issued by the local agencies. So usually we broke at lunchtime and we switched the jobs over, sortation from a repair to sortation. So in some cases we switched drivers out on the forklifts. This provided the additional opportunity of making sure that everybody was cross-trained on all the work positions within the plant. But it's something that you might want to think of, particularly if you're dealing with very, very heavy pallets like a glass pallet. Once again, the next part of how to prevent MSDS is around lifting and carrying. So we talked about proper lifting techniques where you avoid twisting and you turn with your feet. Many people are starting to look at using conveyor belts to move pallets throughout their plant. Once again, they don't have to be expensive, okay, but they should be in good working order, and you should have some thought given to how you're moving inventory away from your workstations. So a little bit of thought. and a little bit of money spent on organizing the workplace with some simple conveyors, simple stackers, can achieve higher productivity, eliminate the incidence of MSDSs, and in some cases prevent the regulatory agency from coming in and providing work orders where you have to comply with. Next issue is around tool design and maintenance. So in pallet recycling operations, typically there's the tool that you see in front of you for board removal. Some people use bandsaws, some people use dismantling equipment like Pass 1s. The key thing is to use properly designed tools rather than something like a crowbar, which isn't designed for board removal. The second point I would make is to make sure that you have plenty of the tools available. And something that we found from very practical experience in running both repair operations and high-speed inspection systems is that you want to make ample supply of devices, either 8-foot, 10-foot, or 12-foot picaroons to help clear line jams. And there's a very specific reason for this. When you're clearing a line jam on a motor mechanized line, the pallet's under pressure. And what we found was that when people grabbed a hold of the pallet and pushed it into position so that it could move down the conveyor, the pallet would kick forward and wrench the shoulder. Whereas if they were using a tool like a picaroon, they could easily push the pallet into position and eliminate the jam. And if it pulled them, they could drop the picaroon, okay, and it wouldn't injure the shoulder. So these are something to investigate in your workplace, which is proper tools and maintenance of the tools to make sure that people aren't incurring MSDSs. Finally, around injury management. So, how do you manage ergonomic injuries in the workplace? We've talked about the prevention side, but once you've done the training, the next step is to go through the workplace. Typically, you do this with your Joint Health and Safety Committee and identify areas where you could have the potential of a hazard to exist. And typically, you do this by talking to your staff and developing some dialogue on where problems exist. A good example is just what I talked about. You have a pallet load of nails that have come in, and people are picking up boxes 2 and 3 at a time, and you ask the employees, why are you picking up, why are you doing this? Why are you picking up 3 boxes at a time? And the points mentioned is that the hand cart is never available. It's used somewhere else in the building, and so that's why we're doing it. There's an opportunity to place a cart, make sure that it's there on a daily basis to eliminate the potential of somebody injuring their back when they're picking up nails and those type of quantities. Next step is around hiring a professional to do a job safety assessment. Another word for that is a physical demands analysis, or PD. Typically, these are occupational therapists or somebody that knows what they're talking about. And if you need an example of somebody that does that in your particular province or region, we could certainly put you in touch with them. But they go into the workplace and they look specifically at the type of work being done and define the load factor that's occurring on the body and whether that's within the limits placed by your local regulatory agency. And those are very good things to have if you're in a situation where you've attracted the attention of the regulatory agency and you have to legitimize the fact that the work is not injuring your particular employee. And in our industry, the regulatory agencies are always going to be concerned about the type of work being done because it is heavy and physical in nature. The third method for preventing ergonomic injuries in the workplace I want to talk about is the reporting and response system. So the challenge is to get employees to talk about this and bring it forward. I know there's a legitimate concern that in talking about it, you'll have everybody coming forward with these type of injuries. My experience, that hasn't been the case. But what we want is that when somebody feels discomfort from an injury, that they feel comfortable in bringing it forward to either a member of the Joint Health and Safety Committee or a supervisor, and that the supervisor is trained properly to deal with it. The last thing you want is somebody to work through an injury, end up going home in a really bad condition, and then ending up at a doctor at 6 o'clock saying, "I injured myself at work." In that case, you've lost control of the situation, whereas you potentially could have dealt with it when the injury first occurred if your employee had understood that it's all right to come forward and your supervisor was properly trained on how to deal with that particular MSD. So encouragement of employees to participate and report their MSDSs is a type of a frontline approach to making sure that you don't have serious injury in your workplace. In my case, I've always designated a coordinator inside the plant, someone who knows how to deal with these type of issues and can counsel a supervisor. That might be yourself, or it might be a lead hand or a shift supervisor. It was somebody that can say, "Look, this is how we're going to deal with this particular issue. I want you to rest it. I want you to rotate to another job." There's a strategy for preventing it from becoming more serious. Proper training is important, and devising a control strategy with input from your Joint Health and Safety Committee is also a key part of making sure that you don't have injuries in the workplace. The last part of the training is a competency assessment. So the reason we have competency assessments are twofold. One is to demonstrate to a regulatory agency that the training was understood by your employees. And number two is to satisfy yourself that the training that you've delivered to the staff is understood. And if it isn't understood, let them ask questions so that they do gain comprehension of what the training seeks to accomplish. So there's 6 questions. These are not meant to be difficult in nature, but they're meant to develop an understanding of the course outline. And these can be handed in written format. My experience, I walk them through it, okay, and talk to them about it and develop an understanding. The last part of it is the training log, and that's found on the website. So the important thing to remember at this juncture is that you capture the names of all the employees that took the training, and you give them both a personalized copy of the training and you record the date and the trainer in your records in case you're asked for. So the objective of this short module is to introduce the concepts of ergonomics, the concept of musculoskeletal disorders, how to recognize them, what to do about them, and how to train your staff to prevent them. Thank you for attending, and both the proper training package, the standard work procedure, and the training registry will be loaded onto our website on the 3rd module. Thank you for attending.